It's Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. What's up, humans? This is Katie Rose, straight up with a twist. It's the spooky season. This is Halloween. This is Halloween. We are here. I have all my decorations out, which are very minimal. I have a home that has no storage space. It was built in like 1982, 1984, and I always am struggling to find places to put things. We're actually going to get a shed so we can move stuff out of the garage as well. And you know, being a Floridian, that's how it is. You only get a third of your house, where if you go up north, you get an attic, you get a full-size basement, and your house. It's incredible. So we always get gypped down here in Florida. And with all of the flooding lately, people have just been dealing with things. I even had a car accident a couple weeks ago, and they still haven't gotten back to me because there's just so many insurance claims going on right now. I was watching The View this morning, but Kathy Najimy, who plays Mary, was on, and there was this really awkward moment. And these are the kinds of things that my husband goes, "Is that what happened?" And I can just see it, and I'm like, oh my gosh. And it's hard to tell people's expressions these days because everybody's doing Botox. But first of all, she looks great. But she was talking about Sister Act, and she's like, I don't know. I heard grumbles of like, you know, if it's in the works for a Sister Act 3. And she's like, I don't know, Whoopi, is that happening? And Whoopi just like paused and looked at her and was like, yeah, actually, yeah, we get the script in 2 days. And then she's like, but it's always great having you on the show. You should really come back and play with us. Anyways, and just just skirts off the topic. And she's sitting there. Kathy's like, oh, yeah, yeah. And like, it probably didn't even process to her yet. But I'm like, I don't think you're invited. It was just one of those like, oh, this is awkward moments. Like maybe they're having Whoopi, but they're bringing in like all new actors possibly. But clearly Kathy is in the dark and has no idea. And I'm like, if you're getting the script in 2 days, then you're probably not involved in the project, right? I feel like she would have heard by now. So it was just like one of those like professional awkward moments. Like we've all been there before. Like, wait, did you get a call for the job? Well, I didn't, you know? I was like, and I'm like, been there, Kathy, been there. It was just a funny moment to watch and awkward. So I got the new iPhone. It was a dramatic transition. Apparently, when you order the new iPhone 14 or probably any iPhones, they have a process where when you agree with the trade-in and like you're supposed to mail your phone back and you get a credit and all this stuff, I had set all of this up. I signed all the paperwork. I was on the phone with this guy for like an hour, and I'm like, that's weird. The credit didn't go through. So I had to call again today, spend another hour on the phone troubleshooting. And she's like, oh, Apple's really weird. Did you turn your phone into like turn off your Find My iPhone on your phone? And I was like, no. And she's like, you have to do that or else we can't process the exchange, like returning the phone. And I was like, what? And I'm like, well, that's a weird loophole thing. I was like, and the guy didn't tell me to do that. So then we had to go through all this stuff, and then she, you know, fixed it for me. So now I'll be able to deliver my iPhone since now I've already transferred everything over. So yeah, the Find My iPhone thing needs to be turned off for some reason. And I always think it's strange too with phones, like how it will try to guess things that you're writing. Like the other day, I wrote members, and instead of members, it said meme bees. And I'm like, I can't believe that my phone decided that the word meme, which isn't this a new word anyways, and bees was something that I would type more, or that might be more common than the word members. I was like, how did it guess that over members? Meme bees. I was like, really? It's just really funny to me because, you know, a lot of times too, like they'll say, oh, well, it'll remember things you've typed before. I'm like, I don't ever write the word meme. Like I just don't. It's like, I don't talk about memes. Sometimes I've sent them before, but I don't even talk, like I'm a little older of the generation. I don't talk about those things that often. And so I just thought it was weird that it chose to do that. Also in the news, Adam Levine, which I love Adam Levine, but I'm like, really, dude? I don't know. You never really know like what the context is. I read a couple of the messages that he may have sent to these women. And if you don't know about it, I guess he had messaged women on Instagram or something and was saying like, "Oh, you look really hot," or whatever, like things like that. And, I mean, I'm okay with certain communication. I understand that people might throw out a little flirtatious thing here and there that don't have any next step intentions, but these kind of did look a little crossing the line, and he has since apologized for it. I think that's the danger, right? And people look at relationships, especially celebrity relationships, and they're like, they're both so gorgeous. He's married to a Victoria's Secret model, and so is her name Giselle? It's Tom Brady, right? And they are getting divorced. Well, anyways, you always look at like these gorgeous couples and you're like, how could they possibly get bored of each other? Like, they're both so gorgeous, and shouldn't they be happy? They have everything they need. They've got money, da da da. But like, it just goes to show you, like, anybody can waver and falter, and we can all lose sight of our significant others because life is crazy and busy in all ways and forms. People always say, you think, oh, if I have it all, if I have all the money, then it's money can't buy me love. It really can't. It makes the world go around, but it doesn't mean it's going to bring you true happiness. And I think it's funny but not funny, but like when you're in these relationships too, like you see how these people can get misguided and just lazy in their personal lives, and then they do take the bait, and they start talking and things like that. But then it's like you take the one step and you get away with it. You take the other step, you get away with it. When you keep getting away with it, it gets more dangerous. And if you don't acknowledge yourself and what you're doing, then when like your wife finds out, it's like, or it could be either way, but in this scenario it's the wife who finds out. It's like all of a sudden is like backpedal. Oh my god, no, actually I do realize what I have. I do love my wife. I do love everything that I have. I'm an idiot. Why did I do that? Because that risk, because you were really just doing it for the excitement of it. It didn't mean you were gonna, it's like you get so close to cheating, but you don't. It's really about the chase. That's what it's about. It's not about actually doing the thing. And if you do the thing, then you're really out of the game. But it's about that chase. And your cocktail of the day is the Corpse Reviver. This is going to be 3/4 parts gin, 3/4 parts triple sec, 3/4 ounces of lemon juice, 3/4 ounce of Lillet Blanc. Shake with ice and strain into a chilled cocktail glass, rinsed with absinthe. Garnished with a lemon twist, and enjoy. Can you love more than one person? And should you talk to exes? So we're going to talk today about caring about more than one person, loving more than one person in your lifetime, what is appropriate and what is not appropriate. And there are different viewpoints on this topic. Why can't we be friends? When Harry met Sally. It's all of these things. It's what movies and songs are made of. And I have struggled with this concept probably my entire life. I definitely have friends that are like, absolutely not. You cannot hang out with an ex. And then I have people that are like, yeah, I think you could do it if you're both on the same page, or there's just all these different viewpoints of it. And that's kind of why I wanted to talk about it today, because I've asked enough questions that I feel like I can understand both of these perspectives. Now, I have hung out with exes before, but what is an ex? What do we define as an ex? Is this a person that you definitely were boyfriend and girlfriend? Does the length of time of that relationship come into the equation here? What are all of the do's and don'ts of this situation? Now, most people go off of, I'm married now, so it is inappropriate for me to meet up or speak to an ex. Now, I know marriages that literally got divorced over this type of obsessive, paranoid behavior. And that is the balance, right? Everything I always say has to have a balance, right? So if you get married and somebody messages your now husband And you take that to the next level by being very angry about it and assuming the worst in your husband, that he's going to cheat, something's going to happen, blah, blah, blah. Then you kind of start controlling the narrative, and you start controlling this person and who and what they're allowed to, who they're allowed to talk to and what they're allowed to do in their lives. And I think that is a dangerous territory as well. Now, I think, a lot of young marriages tend to get into these fights, and maybe when we get older and we've been around the block and we've had these romantic experiences, we learn and we make sure that we have these serious conversations before we make these vows. Like, make sure this person and that all of the rules of the relationship are out on the table before you make these commitments to one another, so that it doesn't come up later and you're not like completely blindsided. Like, why is she getting all crazy? Why is he getting obsessive and paranoid? It could go either way in the scenario. I guess I love the movie When Harry Met Sally. I mean, I feel close to that story just because I did marry my best friend as well, one of my best friends. It was kind of that same situation, like always there, wasn't the obvious choice, but you start seeing a different side of that person because that person is always there for you. And then it becomes a stronger and a different kind of love, where how do we normally date? Right? It's usually like it's looks based. We look at somebody and we're like, wow, that's an attractive person. Now let me get to know them. And in a friendship scenario, I think this is true. People can fight me on this, whatever, but one person will always like somebody in the opposite sex or same sex, whatever, sex that you like, whether it's, a man and a man, one of the other halves will like somebody more than the other person. So if somebody is claiming this is just a friendship, usually the other person is like, I mean, yes, I hear you. It's just a friendship, but I secretly would like more. And in this scenario, that was my husband. He secretly would have liked more and always kept that rapport with me to be close with me. And I didn't notice it till, 10 years into our friendship that maybe I could see something more with him, because I didn't feel that sexual attraction, and sometimes you don't. Like, and it matters. It matters. Sexual attraction matters. I think some people don't allow that. And I think for a woman, male and female relationships, we kind of do expect the man to show us that side of them. And then if we're still like, yeah, no, I'm not into that, then the guy has to respectfully back off, right? So this is just going off what I've been through. But like, at first I really wasn't into him, and anytime that he would kind of make a joke and see if I was interested, he would back off until I started appreciating this side of him. I started seeing it, and he showed me that side of him. It wasn't just friendly friend at the time. It was, more. He allowed me to see the sexy side of him. And then I was like, oh, wow. I didn't notice that before, and now I'm seeing it, and this is interesting. And, you show people a part of you that you want them to see in so many scenarios. But does sexual attraction mean it's real? This is something I've heard a lot of people say before. That like, if there's no sexual attraction, it can't work. But I would beg to say that if you've been in a relationship for a long time, that kind of goes away. It can be found again. And this is what therapy is about. And listening to a partner and making time for somebody and having date nights and all of these things. But I mean, it kind of goes away. I think it's true that you really only get that like fire unless you set the scene. And this is as a woman. I mean, and I feel like men could tap into this if they weren't raised to think, well, I'm a guy, so I'm allowed to watch porn and I'm allowed to jerk off and it's just accepted because I'm a man. It's like, well, maybe if society and our world didn't just shove that in your face, maybe you would appreciate the things that women really like, which is the full experience. It's setting up the mood. It's, because I would always get, frustrated because I always say you need to have the dead space. I said in our world today with social media, if there is dead space or time to fill, what's the first thing we do? We pick up our phones and we look at it to fill the dead space. You have to have the dead space and those awkward little moments to make the eye contact, to have that butterfly feeling. If there's no dead space, we're skipping all of those things. And now people are skipping lots of steps. People skip tons of steps today with online dating and all of these things. And we're not allowing things to simmer anymore. For me, I feel like there's always one person who feels a little bit more than the other, and that's shown even in the movie When Harry Met Sally. And it takes her some time, and I think it's okay. I think I would say, just in my experience, I would say don't give up on that. Like, if you feel like something's there, I don't mean be a creepy stalker person, but if you are actually friends with the person, give it time, because man, my husband he gave it all the time, and even when we did have an intimate moment and he messed up, and then, it took even longer, he still hung in there, even though I told him no. And I was like, no, you messed up. And, because I had been vulnerable with him. And then he did the dumbest thing and was like, oh, I'm not going to talk to you for a week, because he thought he saw that stupid Vince Vaughn movie. And he took advice from this dumb movie. No, you gotta let it simmer, and you can't, talk, to the girl for a few days. I'm like, okay, yes, that is true. And you don't want to look desperate if it's someone you just met. I knew him for 10 years. This was like a big deal that we had kissed, and, things were moving in that direction. And then he just didn't talk to me for a week. I was like, F you. I was like, what is wrong with you? And he messed up. He was thinking, he was on like cloud nine, and I was mad. And he's like, what did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? And I was like, I've known you. I was like, we just had this like great moment together, and this was like, kind of life changing for me. And it was something that I didn't know I felt, and then you ruined it, And so he had to like start all over again with me, and it took him months of dating me, and lots of money was spent on me. I had a great time. But eventually I was like, this is a good man. And that's what it came down to. And there are other scenarios too, sadly, and this can happen. When you do, especially for me, I can say I've put so much of my heart and soul and time into a man, and then they wouldn't show up for me. And I started realizing it was so one-sided. I kept showing up. I mean, literally, even just driving like far distances to be with a person, making the efforts, writing the letters, making the phone calls, making the flights. And when you're putting all this effort in and it's not being reciprocated, the man's being lazy, And then the sad thing that happens, especially when you're young and you're going through this, is you fall out of love, because you're like, I'm tired. I keep putting in all this energy, and you're not appreciating it. And I've had this happen where I finally was like, I'm done, and I've left. And then like a few weeks, maybe a couple months go by, and then that person tries to come back to you. And I mean, I had somebody come back to me, literally flew in from another state and came and sat in the front row of a show I was doing. And literally I'm like singing in the middle of the show, and my heart was I was like, oh my God, why is this person here? And I like freaked out and had to keep performing. I was like, oh my God, oh my God. And then I see him after, and he comes and professes his love to me. And I'm sure he thought of it as like this big gesture, and it was like a movie moment for him. But my heart had moved on. And he was like, I came here to tell you I love you. And I'm like, it's too late, and that can happen too. And it's very devastating. We can be kind of blind and dumb and don't know what we have when it's right in front of us until it's gone, and that does happen. But it makes us, learn and grow for the next person, and how to be a better partner, how to be there for your person. Also, just, with what men do in my life, something happened the other day, and my husband switched sides with me. He knows that I have a preference on sides, but he switched sides, and I was like, what are you doing? And I was like, did you just walk curbside for me? I'm like, that is so hot. Like, he was protecting me. And I was like, that is so sweet. And it's like, just those little things, that is what's going to get a girl going. It's stuff like that. That is, you got to get into the mind of a woman, man, if you really want her, because that's the stuff. And here's the thing. A girl can sense if you're doing it on purpose just to be amazing, like the opening up the door thing. I've had guys that do that and it's natural for them. It's a very obvious thing. You can see when a guy is trying too hard, which like you want a guy to try, but then like you see guys who do these certain things and they're like their tricks and that's like how they get girls. So you have to be careful. You have to really learn somebody and if they're doing it genuinely or if they're just doing it because this is part of their play, their game that they do when they take girls out on dates and you're one of 100 for the week, you know. Can we be friends? Things that will forever go unsaid from your heart are something that now that I'm married, I feel like this is how I feel. I'm married now. If you ever felt a certain way about me, just let me know. Cause like I'm going to stay with my husband, but like I'm just curious. Like I've literally had guys come out of the woodworks. Like there was one or two guys, and then he's like, I would have dated you. And I was like, what? I was like, I didn't know that. Like it's too late now, but I'm like, what? I think that's so interesting. Like I'm not going to get divorced and like run to you and like try to start some other relationship, but I've had guys, who've said that to me and I'm like, I don't know, like sometimes I want to do that. Like maybe I should reach out to a guy and be like, I mean, it doesn't matter anymore, but like I totally used to like you. Like I think it's interesting to know, I guess. It's not going to do anything, but I think it can make you feel good, maybe, or maybe it would do something and someone would be like, I'm leaving my husband for you or whatever, because it could forever go unsaid from your heart. And one person might feel a certain way about you and you'll always wonder if they were ever thinking that same thing. I don't like the wonderment forever. Like, I think there's still people out there, my mom even, it's like she'll tell me stories of when she was younger and she's like, oh, I wonder if he still thinks about me. I think people always wonder that, right? Is that person still thinking about me? Did that person ever really like me? I always felt like they did, but then they never said anything, or we were going to date, but it didn't work out. I think it's interesting. I don't know. Like, and is it appropriate? Probably not, but like, I want to know. I think you all want to know. I think everybody would like to know if somebody liked them at some point and that you're not crazy and that like you felt it or like you kind of knew it, because there are situations. Okay. So here's what I want to talk about. If there are situations in your life and you're gonna find attractions with other people, the idea of a soulmate when we're young, it's like we just hear it. There's this Pink song and that she sings with this guitar and she's talking about like, I don't believe in soulmates, happy endings, or the one. And we put that into our brains. It's Valentine's Day. It's all these things that, we put this on ourselves and we don't need to put that kind of pressure on ourselves. I find that it's also just about finding a life partner. And I prefer that to be how we say it. A person that you feel is your yin and yang to your life and helps you in places where you lack, and they are your partner in that way. I feel like a partnership and an understanding and a friendship too at the base of it is what makes those strong relationships. Because I've had plenty of super passionate relationships, but then when it came down to the real stuff, I'm like, it's not working, and it's weird because like you kind of wish like you could have both worlds, right? You wish you could have both of those things, but you can't have it all, That's the thing with the writing the list of things on paper. Oh, I wish he had all of these things. If they don't make the cut, it's like, no, there's no perfect person out there. You just have to love the imperfections and enough. You have to love that person enough to be okay with those imperfections, I suppose, and also love those imperfections. So you have to find the main thing that you love about living with that person, because this is your life that you are living with them. That has to be more important than just like the passionate, intimate, things, which I'm not saying that that's not important, but I feel like the day-to-day life stuff is more important. I have to confess that I have been in a situation where I've met up with an ex before. And here's the thing. I've always told my friends this. I'm like, what's the big deal? I'm like, you loved that person, right? And you care about that person. And it didn't work out for whatever reason. And whether it doesn't matter the length. I mean, I've had feelings for people that like I was only kind of dating before. They were big feelings, or I really didn't see them that much. And usually the reason those relationships didn't work, honestly, was because the guy didn't put in enough effort. And I was like, psh, I'm done. Okay. And there's all different reasons as to why a guy doesn't do that. I'm not just saying he's a douche canoe, because they're not. It's life. They're going through their own things too, and timing is everything, right? And a lot of this advice comes from friends who have been through divorces because of cheating and unfaithfulness and all of those things. So I understand, I suppose, if you've already been through that you and your new person would be like, absolutely not. We do not meet up with exes because they know what they're capable of. And I think that is so respectable. That is making a choice every day. Every day you choose to be with this person. That is what it is. And this is one of the best, some of the best advice I've received is somebody I worked with. And he always said, I just don't put myself in the situation to begin with. And I'm like, that is so smart. So if you get that text, if you get that call, if you get those inbox messages and they're like, oh, we should meet up, then if you know that you are capable of faltering, you say, no, I really can't. And in some ways, you should probably be really honest with that person so they don't continue to message you and you're not just like ignoring them. Be like, look, this is my situation. Like, I just don't think it's a good idea, at all ever moving forward. And that makes sense. But we're all going to meet people that we are attracted to. Like, we're going to have connections with other humans. Like I said, the idea of the soulmate and there's only one person, like, yeah, sure, you picked the one person, but you chose that person. But you're always going to have connections with the other people. I mean, I've had so many soul connections with people, and I've had soul connections with people that I wasn't physically attracted to. Like, I'm like, oh my gosh, like, this is like what, people will say my spirit animal or whatever, like different things. Like, you have these things and you just instantly, or like other female friendships I've had, like fast friends. I'm like, yep, I have a soul connection with this person. That doesn't mean you have to like live with them and marry them and be with them. You can have all kinds of connections like that. And I think they are lovely and wonderful. And I think they're worth the attention, I guess. And I think the hard part is it okay to go out with an ex? And is it okay to hang out with another person of the opposite sex? And then, of course, then it's like you get away with it if the person's not the same sexual orientation as you. So I could go out with a gay guy, and that would be okay. But if I went out with a straight guy, it's funny, as my husband said to me, as long as you pay your own way, then it's not a date. So he's like, you can go, but the guy's not allowed to buy you anything. And I'm like, okay, but all right. And I think and of course, people get nervous, especially if there's alcohol involved or, marijuana or whatever it is that you do, because it might alter your judgment. And then that's when you can get into trouble. Right. And I guess I was just going to say my confession is I have hung out with exes before and nothing has happened, but I can tell and I can feel it's like, oh, this is why people don't do this. Yep, this is not, maybe I shouldn't do that. Because you can't always trust what someone else's intentions are. I know I'm married. I know I wouldn't do anything. And so you think, cool, I'm going to hang out with this person. But I'm like, oh yeah, he's a dude. He's still going to try whether I'm married or not, sadly, but true. Most people are kind of like, well, I don't know her situation. Maybe she's not happy. And, I don't know. And it is hard. It's hard to turn off someone that you cared about before. It's like, oh yeah. And then you like reminded, like you move on with your life. And then it's like you get reminded by meeting up with that person and you're reminded of, oh yeah, I really liked this person. And you are in that danger zone. So I could see how it could happen. And I really do think the best advice is to keep a safe distance, or I think you should, if you want to meet up with an ex or see an ex and like, oh my God, yeah, and because you still care about that person or like you run in the same circles, just make sure you're around other people. You're like in public, there's other people there. Maybe there's other friends around. Maybe you bring your significant other with you, like whatever. Then it's kosher. And then you are catching up with that person to catch up with them because you still care about them. And then nothing's going to happen. So that might be a better solution for those things. But I think it's silly to ever think you could just turn everything off. You're always going to care or love or have an attraction to a person that you used to be attracted to. Now, there are some people that they really, hurt you so bad, or you really had to close your heart off and move on, that you really don't have those feelings anymore. And one person from that relationship might have more of those thoughts and feelings in the other person. And it can become very awkward when a girl is like, yeah, no, I have nothing for you anymore. And the guy's like thinking there's still something there. And you're like, no, it's really, really hard. That's a very, very tough situation. But I love the feeling of love, whether it's with, a friendship. I like those feelings, and I think, that's from being like a social butterfly kind of a person. Like I like to surround myself with all kinds of love, because it makes me feel good. I think it's the way that I lived my life and explored in relationships and different relationships, different cultures, literally, like that. I think that is what brought me to this wonderful, great marriage that I have. Because if you live your life scared of meeting the wrong love, you'll never really live at all. So I think you have to take those risks and date the people that you're unsure about, and just get yourself out there so that you can find that right love. I think it's people that are like, yeah, I don't know, and they question everything all of the time, that it's going to be harder for them to find that true love, because they have their list, they have their little book and their list, and they they prioritize their life differently. For me, I made sure to prioritize my dating life. I was like, I know I want to spend my life with another person. I just need to find who that person is. And what if you grew up with that person? What if they were your best friend for forever, but maybe that person did like you more, but it didn't work out, and then you marry someone else, and then your husband's like, yeah, you're not allowed to hang out with that person. And you're like, excuse me? Like, I grew up with this person. Like, you can't tell me that I can't do that. And I think that's where, like, a lot of tumultuous relationships will occur is, at the end of the day, it's really just about trust. It's about trusting your partner. And honestly, we have to reflect and we have to try to see if we can trust ourselves. You have to be honest with yourself before you can be honest with somebody else. And other times, I think you have to set a time limit too. I'm going to hang out with this person from this time to this time. And that way, I won't get too drunk. I won't, go too far. And I know I'm leaving at this time. So let's say the person is single that meets up with you, but you're married. I think it's immature and erroneous on their part to think or try to make something happen. It's, then it's like when you pull away from that later, especially on the girl side, like if you pull away from that later, you realize that person still doesn't respect me the way that I wanted them to. It kind of reminds you of like why the relationship didn't work out in the first place. You're like, because look at the disrespect, right? Like it's one thing for a guy to be like, dang, the one that got away or whatever. And like you can hang out and kind of joke about it or whatever. But for someone to actually try to do something with you and you have to be like, no, I can't because I'm married, like that shouldn't ever have to happen. You shouldn't be put in that situation. You should be able to hang out with somebody, that you were close with or dated before. And it should be fine because it should be a respected situation. The only time that would happen is if you message that person and you both are, lying and you are cheating, and you met up with those intentions. But if somebody who's married meets up with the intention to just catch up with somebody, and maybe flirt a little bit, which is fine, whatever, that happens, human nature, then the other person needs to be respectful and understand this person is married, nothing can happen, regardless of your possible still feelings, still existing feelings for that person. If the occasion presents itself, just be smart about it, be true to yourself, set the tone, make sure that, I will just say stuff. I will be like, just so you know, nothing's going to happen. I'm married. Like I will literally be ridiculous and just like say stuff. And then it just becomes a joke and then it kind of breaks the ice and it's like, okay. I think sometimes when relationships end, sometimes there's not closure. And sometimes I think those meetups it's a catch-up session and it helps the other person maybe talk about something from a long time ago that doesn't matter anymore because we've all moved on. And it kind of helps them have closure for whatever your relationship was. Whereas maybe all those years ago, it wasn't something you ever really understood. And people sometimes can be more open and honest and vulnerable about their past when time has moved on, when time has passed. So I've always been unique in the way that I think and the way that I approach life. And I guess I just feel like if I want to know something, I'm going to ask about it. And I guess it's like the unknown is what is so interesting about our universe and our world to begin with. So it's like, the afterlife, all of these things that we want to know. Well, if I can have control over this, over these little things that I think about all the time, then I'm going to find out, like I only have control over this life that I live. So I'm like, oh, this is intriguing to me. Like, I want to know, like, did this person have feelings for me? Why did you do this thing? How come our relationship didn't work, 15 years ago or whatever? Like, I just think it's interesting, like, to get into the heads of somebody. And I've gotten answers, after all this time. Like, one guy was like, I was young. Like, it didn't feel like we were. He's like, I was young and I had a, kid and I was doing this and I wasn't ready. I mean, you were, but I wasn't. And I'm like, oh, that's so true, because you sometimes don't get that closure. And you're like, oh, so it wasn't just like, you didn't love and care about me. It was like you were still, figuring out like other issues in your life, whether it's baby mama issues or whatever. And it's like you have to understand, like, there are always these two stories trying to fit into the same timeline and to fit you when you're ready. People could say, well, you lost all these years with your husband because you guys could have been together all these years ago when he liked you. Like, sure, but then he wouldn't have had his experiences and I wouldn't have had mine. And, I think that makes us smarter, better, people for us as a couple, so now we know the things that we should do better, and we understand each other, and how to commit to a marriage better because of those past relationships. But these meetups and, friendships with, exes or people you used to care about or whatever are prescribed by society as improper. And I think the real question you have to ask yourself is, why do I feel like I need to meet up with my ex? What's really going on in your marriage or your relationship that you feel like you need attention from an ex? It, is kind of what it comes down to. There must be something else going on in your life that you feel like you're not getting the support or the attention or the love or whatever, that your eye wanders, that you're like, I'm going to find it somewhere else. And you don't even know that that's what you're really doing, but it is. It's like you're looking for this hole in your heart to be filled. And, and sometimes it's not because you're not telling your significant other that you need this. It's that they don't know how to give it to you sometimes. And that's just something that comes down to work. It's just working on your marriage constantly and being open and saying, hey, I'm feeling like this. I don't really know why I'm feeling like this, because sometimes your partner is not doing anything at all. Sometimes it's you. You're the one going through the hard time. You're the one who is either depressed or you don't have the job that you want right now. And there's things going on in your life and you're feeling down. And there's only so much your partner can do to lift you up, right? It's like they can be there for you and do all the right things. And sometimes you just want to escape. This is why I like to travel, because for me, traveling is like, that is like cheating for me. I'm like, oh, if you can just put me on a beach and get me a flight to Italy, or let's go on a cruise or whatever. It doesn't have to be a crazy expensive trip. That's my escape. That's my, promiscuous like release, is doing that, is getting to explore the world and see things and try different, restaurants and fun things like that. I get just as much joy, from doing that as I would, well, more joy than, I wouldn't get any joy from cheating, but yeah, it is a danger zone. It is the highway to the danger zone. And I used to think that song was I Went to the Danger Zone. There's so many songs like that, right, that we mishear. It cracks me up. It'll be like years and years and years. And there's also songs that people just like, when it gets to that part, you just mumble through it. And that's just how it is. Nobody ever knew what that section was. But with the power of, the internet, we can look up so many things nowadays. I think we need to accept human nature more openly and with an understanding of it. I think we, as a society, we put ourselves in these, these rules. And, I'm not saying that, oh, we're like animals in the animal kingdom. And so, like how guys are always making that excuse, oh, that's just my nature. A man needs this and a man needs that and yada, yada, yada. It's like we always focus on what a man needs, and no one's running around being like, well, a girl needs this and a girl needs that. So why aren't you giving it to me? Like a lot of times too, even in the Bible, it'll be like, to obey or serve, to be subordinate to your husband. And it's like, wait a minute. Why is it always about his needs? It's like I have them too. And they're not always just sexual, but for some reason, with a guy, it's always like, oh, well, I need this and I cheated on you because you never give it up. It's like, okay, well, you never give up your soul to me. You never give up your attention and your time and, the things, you never try to turn me on anymore. You never make the attempt to have a good conversation with me, which would lead to the thing that you so desperately need, which is sex. It's like, I think we forget about our significant other's needs as well. And I think, we can't overly focus or sexualize it, but I think that is, everybody is capable of a wandering eye and wanting to feel something, that's what we're always searching for, is just feeling needed, feeling wanted, feeling loved. And I also just think it's interesting, matters of the heart, and just kind of finding out, like, is it just me, or do you also feel this way? Like understanding that you can have connections with somebody. It doesn't mean that the connection means you guys have to bone each other. But like I've done this with people before. I've been like, we have a connection, right? And they're like, yeah, totally. I'm like, okay, but like we don't want to bang, but like we have a connection. And then it makes the friendship even stronger because it's like we just acknowledged that like we totally can hang and we totally have a connection, but nothing's ever going to happen. And then you kind of get that out of the way, and those are those types of interesting things that like me, I uniquely bring them up, where like a normal person would never, ever, ever bring those things up, acknowledge them, acknowledge the palpable, you can cut it with a knife tension in the air, but I would do that. Like, I'm like, wait a minute. Because it's like magic. It really is kind of magical. It's like, oh, I felt it. Did you feel it too? Because it's cool when it happens. Because like normally you see people every day, your coworkers, whatever, and it's just like, there's a human. And like you might have some like regular conversation here and there, joke, but you're still thinking about your task list in your head when you're talking to those friends. But then when you have these like special moments, like I feel like they need to be like pointed out almost because they're super special. It's like, whoa, it's happening. There it is. It's like there's this like fairy dust around or something. And I'm like, that's so neat. But like I said, I don't know. This is just this weird thing about me, this weird joy, these weird emotions that I feel. And I feel like they're so cool and kind of unexplained that like I have to point them out. And it almost sometimes feels like you met somebody who may have also been in a past life with you. And so then it's like, well, maybe they both, do you have dreams like this too? Like I like to ask like really the weird questions. I'm like I will tell people I had a dream about you last night just in case they had one about me. Cause I'm like, did we meet in a dream? Was our energy, like feeling each other, like from far away? Like, I don't know. Like, even when those moments, like my friend, just messaged me today and was like, hey, I was thinking about you. I miss you. And I was like, oh my God, I was just thinking about you too. Like, is that a coincidence? I mean, that's what we chalk it up to be. But like, sometimes that's weird, right? You're like, I was just thinking about you. Or this happens to me a lot. I'll be having like a regular conversation about nothing and I'll say a word, right? I'll be like, and it could be like a random word. Like one time I was watching when I was younger, like Roseanne. I was hanging up a shoe rack and I was like, blah, 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 the shoe rack. And as I said shoe rack, Roseanne said shoe rack. on the TV show. And I'm like, that's weird. Shoe rack is not something that people say all the time, you know? And like those are coincidences, you know, that's a real coincidence, but those little things happen all the time. So sometimes I like to check in just to see if they're not coincidences. And I'm like, oh, maybe there's some, you know, intergalactic spiritual connection happening. I don't know. There's so much that our heart can't explain. And I just feel like it's all interesting. And I guess that's why I invite it into my life. I find it all so interesting. I'm like, I will invite this. And then you have to know yourself and just try to make those right choices. And if you do feel like you're wavering, acknowledge, where is that coming from? Is it because of what I'm going through right now? Is it, you know, my relationship is not as strong? You know, make sure that you're focusing on, why is this happening to me? Why am I thinking this way? You know, well, anyways, that's about my matters of the heart and the when Harry met Sally, you know, situation. And also not in a marriage situation, but if you do have a breakup and then you think, oh, I can still hang out with my ex, I would say to stay away from that. Like most relationship experts say, let it breathe, take some time away. It's not to say that you can never come back to one another, but you can't really fully get a scope and understanding of everything because, you know, you do have to pull back. You have to see the full picture, and that hindsight is always 2020. So even just in that small example, if you do break up with somebody, like let it breathe, take the time to think about it, you know, before, you know, just going back to hanging and thinking you can just do that. Because everyone thinks, oh, yeah, I can just do that. I'll be cool with it. No, you know, if you see that, if that person says, yeah, I went on a date, you're going to get upset. You're going to get jealous. It's better to not know what's going on in that person's life. And then if you can be strong enough to handle it later, I'm like, then that's when you can, you know, reassess things because, you know, it's just going to be keeping tally score. Oh, did you hook up with somebody? Well, I hooked up with somebody too. I'm talking to this person. I'm doing that. And then you're convincing yourself you're okay when you're really not okay. Not to mention on again, off again relationships really are not the healthiest. And also because if you are having those feelings where you're really just not connecting with your husband, with the person that you are married to, a lot of times it's really dangerous because if you go out with that ex, you might be going out to complain about your significant other, your spouse, you know, and then that makes that person confused because they're like, are they crying for help? Are they saying they are unhappy in their marriage? Which you might not be. You're just having a marriage. You're just going through regular struggles. And then so then you're kind of confusing that ex that you decided to meet up with, and they're thinking, oh, maybe this is a cry for help. And of course they're going to side with you, they're going to agree with you because you've been with them before. And if they are meeting up with you, they probably still have some sort of feelings for you, possibly, maybe not, you know, and they're going to be like, well, I wouldn't be like that, and no, I would never do that to you. But you don't know. I mean, once you get into a marriage, you know, lots of things mix in the pot, and you know, stresses can happen, and people are capable of doing things they don't think they would ever do. You know, once you're in it, in the midst of, you know, an argument or things like that, you know, we're all capable of, you know, not saying the correct thing, and you know, and hurting somebody's feelings, and quarrels, you know, with our loved ones. We're all capable of that. It's easy to be like, I would never do that. You know, everybody can watch something on TV and be like, you know, even if you're watching Jeopardy, like, why did he say that? You know, and I knew the answer. It's like, well, yeah. I'm like, but when you're stressed and the people are watching you and the camera's on you and there's other people and you have to press that button really quickly, you know, it's like sometimes it's like, you know, of course you're gonna mess up. We're always gonna mess up. We're always gonna fall short, you know, and probably shouldn't be leaning on an ex for advice or venting. You know, sometimes it's like you got to let a day go by to really think about things. The same with social media. Like, don't post your emotions right away. Maybe give it a day to really think about it. And even before talking to friends, you know, I always tell friends, if I do open up to them about struggles I'm having in my relationships, then I'm like, oh, please don't judge that person. I don't want you to see them differently. You know, I want you to understand I'm just going through a tough time. So sometimes you also have to think before you speak, you know, to people about your personal situations too, because you don't want them to, you know, judge them and get a different idea about them because, you know, we all go through this. We're all imperfect. We all say things we didn't mean. And then you have weird narcissists that probably meet up with you to brag about their marriage and gloat in your face about their happiness, which isn't healthy for either party. So I don't recommend that from either, whichever side of the fence you'd be on. That's just silly and a waste of everybody's time and energy. Your happiness alone if somebody did you wrong, should be enough. It's always about the unknown, right? And I believe that if it didn't work, it didn't work. It wasn't going to work. But for a relationship that never blossomed, that never was actually official and had a good try, those are the ones that usually stick on people's minds and hearts for years and years and years. Like the what if, what could that have maybe have looked like? There's like old ladies I've met that have stories like this, and my mother too. And, just like, oh, I always wondered about this person and what it could have maybe been like, but I think the fantasy and the what if is always, they always say like, never meet your heroes, right? Because it would never really be what you imagined it to be. It's just people like fantasy, people like, watching TV to escape, and people like the romance stories. But when you are in a mature marriage, you realize like that is all just like hype, and I always tell people too, you shouldn't get married when you're surrounded by the hype. A lot of people rush into marriages because their job is good. They have all the same friends and everything's going great. Yay, woo, everybody loves us as a couple. Let's get married. And then like they kind of forget to get to know each other more, and all the little intricacies. Can you be in love with two people at the same time, or love somebody else while you're married? I think if you love someone else while you're married, then there's an issue there. But I also think that we dramatize the word in love. I think love comes in different capacities. No one's going to be mad if you say love you to a friend when you leave. And like we use the word love, like, oh, yeah, hey, I love you, and, you say I love you to your mom when you hang up the phone. And I think that you really can care in different ways. I think it's recognizing what kind of love that is. Like I said, I think a love in marriage is different than a lustful kind of love. And I think that's why, why we date and why we try to figure it out so that we can tell the difference, between the types of love. And like I said, I think you can, think about someone and wonder like, oh, what could that have been like? But I think we fantasize and we create something in our head, when we are going through struggles. And we think, oh, it could be better. And it really wouldn't be, you're going to have the same struggles, with that guy too, is kind of the way that I try to look at it and remind myself, everybody fights, everybody yells, right? Just like everybody poops. We put the word love because we don't have enough synonyms, I think you can still be interested. I think you could still be curious. And honestly, if you really love that person, you're going to want them to move on and find the best thing for them. And I think that's really what it is accepting what it was when you had it, and accepting those little sparks and being like, oh, I remember that, and that was lovely, and understanding that was just a part of your timeline and your journey. And I think that's all you can really chalk it up to be, because what's the point, right? What's the point of what ifs? What's the point of worrying or wondering? Because it's not going to change anything. But everybody does think about these things, and if they don't, they're lying. But I think you can. I think you can hang out with an ex and it can be totally fine, as long as there's trust in your marriage and everybody knows it's happening. Everybody knows that you met up, everybody's on board. I've already done this before. It's been great. We caught up, had a great time. Oh, you're dating somebody new. I'm married now. Let's catch up, and everything's kosher. So as long as everybody can be adult and mature about it and be on the same page, I think it's perfectly fine. We are all only human, and we have these brilliant, wonderful minds. And I know that they all, to a certain extent, work the same. Thank you for coming on here, listening, and being vulnerable with me and being open-minded to different viewpoints. This has been Katie Rose, served straight up with a twist.